So hi everyone, welcome for coming. Tonight we're going to have a presentation on starting seeds indoors. We have Jennifer Thompson with us, and she's with Links for Greener Learning. So Jennifer will tell you all about that and how to get your seeds started.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Annie, and thanks for having me. I think if you pin me, does that work? If you just hover over my thumbnail, and is pin the function on Zoom? Yeah, everyone's saying good to go. Okay, yeah. My name is Jennifer, and I work with Links for Greener Learning. They are an organization that works mostly with the schools and groups of newcomers to get folks gardening. And this year we've been doing a lot of programming online, and I also work with the Community Garden Network, the Niagara one. And they help any startups. If you're interested in starting a community garden, or if you're already working with a community garden and looking for more resources, the Niagara Community Garden Network would be the way to go. Got a little bit of feedback. Yeah. If you could just make sure your mic is muted. Is it Cindy, maybe? Could you just mute your mic, if you don't mind?
You know what I need to do? I need to...
Is that okay? Can you hear me still? Everyone can hear me. Okay, good. That's better. Awesome. So I'm going to share my screen now because I've made some slides because it's easier for me to make sure we get through all of the content. There's quite a bit of information coming your way. We'll just hold questions until the very end, and I'd be happy to answer questions. But if you do have comments or questions that you're afraid you're going to forget, feel free to pop them in the chat, and then we can read them out at the end. So, what do we have here? Oops. Oops, we don't want that. We want, oops, not that. Starting seeds indoors. Here we go. Can you see my, do you see a slide that says starting seeds indoors? Do you mind just saying yes?
No, we don't.
Oh, you don't. Okay. So, don't worry, we'll get here.
Technology, so great.
Isn't it though? Oh. Okay, so do you now see slides?
Yeah. Yep,
excellent.
Yes.
Beauty.
I myself again. Perfect. Yes, there we go.
Awesome, beautiful. So we're gonna go over why we want to start seeds indoors and how to select which ones might be a better choice compared to others. And then I'll just do a demo on how to get your seeds up and running with the different soil mixes. So why do you want to start seeds indoors? So I'm sure all of you are here for a reason, because there's some burning reason you'd love to start seeds indoors compared to buying them at a nursery. So you can extend your growing season, which is really lovely, because some plants, there's just really isn't enough time for them to finish their growing cycle here in Niagara. Like tomatoes, for example, you have to start them early. Cool weather crops, you can get 2 harvests if you start them in get a spring harvest, and then you could get a fall harvest as well. It's really lovely to get a head start on your weeds. So if you're already putting a plant in the ground that's 4 or 5 centimeters tall, that's way easier to distinguish it from weeds. So you can clear out all the weeds and put your seedling right into the ground. And it is cheaper. In the beginning, It doesn't seem cheaper because you have to buy the soil, and if you don't have pots at the ready, you might need to invest there, but it is overall cheaper to buy seeds. And then especially when you get into seed saving, it's even cheaper there. Growing indoors also allows you to protect your vulnerable seedlings from pests while they're inside. So by the time they get outside, you know, mammals and other beings love to eat seeds, right? They're really nutrient rich. So sometimes you pop your seeds direct sow, and you may end up with none because there was a hungry squirrel or a hungry bird that pecked them all out of your soil. And then, of course, you have access to a much wider variety of plant species. You can go shopping in those really fun seed catalogs. So you can more than what's available to you at those the nurseries. Oops. So seedlings are super vulnerable. They haven't fully developed their immune system. So what we want to do is set them up for success. So the more we can meet the needs of the plant when it's young, the better it's going to do out there in the world. So we want to make sure we've set it up for success. So what seeds do you want to start from? What plants do you want to start from seed? You want to make sure the ones with the really long lifespans. Get started indoors. So your eggplants, your peppers, tomatoes, your leeks, your onions. Bunching onions are different. If you can also start an onion from a bulb. I'm talking about seed starting. So you'll have already wanted to or start to think about popping your eggplants, peppers, tomatoes, leeks, and onions to give them a good start. And then if they have a really slow root development, it's nice to get those started indoors too, your cauliflowers, again, your eggplants and your peppers. And then if you know that they're vulnerable to pests when they're young, it's nice to keep them safe a little bit longer. So your squash and your eggplant. And then you're also considering, does this plant transplant well? And so some plants do, some plants don't. Let's have a look at the plants that transplant well. So if I'm seed starting my broccoli, my Brussels sprouts, my cabbage, my lettuce, tomatoes, those are all wonderfully easy to transplant. They don't mind being disturbed. They're going to be super resilient. It's a little bit more tricky for cauliflower, celery, eggplant, and onion, but they'll still be okay. The difficult to transplant ones are the cucurbits, that's the family, so the cucumbers and the melons, the squash. Those don't love having their roots disturbed. So you can still do it, you can still transplant them, but you want to be extra careful not to disturb the roots. And then, of course, root vegetables, you just wouldn't even consider starting because, for example, your radishes or your beets, anything, or your carrots, anything that's going to grow what you're going to eat underground, you don't bother to start in a tray. You always direct sow those ones. So here we go. This is a nice chart. I can make this available to you. I can send it to Annie if anyone's looking for it. It gives you a nice range of when to start indoors and when it's safe to put those seedlings outside. So March 14th, I mean, you can start these really early, mid-March into early April, your onions, tomatoes, pepper, eggplants, cabbage. And if you haven't started those yet, not to worry, you can still start them indoors and move them out, but you'll want to make sure your tomatoes are started in the next couple of weeks. So we're now in mid-April. So we're prime time for our broccoli, cauliflowers, celery, lettuce, and nasturtiums, which are a beautiful flower. Your zucchini, your squash, your cucumbers, those are good to go, starting them indoors now, but just pay attention to them being difficult to transplant. So the average last frost date in Niagara is the end of April. That's the average though. So it might range significantly higher than that. So it depends how you feel about having plants die, really, as to what you're going to do. Some people sort of stagger start and stagger moving them outside so that you know, your first wave of transplants that hit your garden might end up dying because it's a bit too cold for them. And then your second wave might make it, but you're for sure going to catch the very earliest harvest. So, you know, it's kind of a trade-off. I usually tend to go on the cautious side because I don't want any of my babies to die. So I wait until after May long weekend to move everything outside. I feel more confident that the frost won't get them. So who can handle a really hard frost? If you put any of these plants out earlier than the last frost date, they're still probably going to make it. I have had some peas die because I got a little bit too keen on putting them out a little too early. But you know, it's just trial and error. If they die, you just reseed them. But these ones can handle a bit of frost. And then these guys can only handle light frost. So generally speaking, you'd want to get some nice cover for them if you're going to pop them out before the May long weekend, right? Well, carrots would be direct sown anyways. Cauliflower, you can pop those transplants out. Beets, those are direct sow, right? So when I say direct sow, I mean that they are root veg, and so it's better to start them off in the ground. These ones don't love the cold, but they'll be okay in the cold, but they don't love it, right? So my beans, my cucumbers, my zucchinis, corn, tomatoes, I don't want to put them outside until the soil gets a little bit warmer, right? They won't love it. They just won't do well. You're better off waiting until the soil conditions are ideal. These ones here do not like cold at all. So even though we're starting our eggplants now, we can't put our eggplant outside until, you know, you're really sure it's going to be warm, like early June, even mid-June, even some of my eggplants will go out. And then all of your squashes, they don't like the cold either. So you want to make sure you pop them in the ground when the soil is nice and warm. And they're called winter squashes, but that's obviously not because they like the cold, but is that those are the ones that store through the winter. Right, so all those melons, so they like the heat. So when selecting what seed you're going to plant, it's a good idea to pay attention to what their whole life cycle is going to look like. You want to make sure you've got room for them in your garden, and you want to know when you're going to move them outside. So let's have a look at cabbage. Anyone who's tried to grow cabbage before, you usually have mixed results for your first year. And the key thing to know about cabbage is it really doesn't like the summer heat. So you're going to want to try and get that cabbage in as early as possible so that you can harvest your nice heads of cabbage before that summer heat. If you put them in too late, they'll do something called bolting. Bolting just means, you know, they're really stressed out, and under stressed conditions, they try to make seeds. So instead of making that nice head of lettuce, they're going to shoot up just like your lettuce will do when it's warm and start to make seeds. It's great if you need seeds, but mostly you're planting them because you want to eat cabbage. So thankfully, cabbage can handle some frost, so you can get them in pretty early. And then you can harvest them, depending on what variety you put in, 80 to 180 days from your seeds. And they are prone to pests, cabbage are. So that's another piece of feedback I usually get from people. So I do recommend covering them, and I recommend covering them as soon as you put them in the ground with some sort of row cover. So everyone loves cabbage, not just us. The flea beetles, the slugs, the aphids, everyone loves cabbage. So if you can get them covered, you'll be good to go. Cabbage thankfully transplants well, so that's an easy adjustment from indoors to outdoors. And you want to make sure you start those seeds 6 to 4 weeks before the last frost. So you're good to go with starting your cabbage seeds already. And we're going to transplant those seedlings into the garden when they're 4 to 6 weeks old, and you're looking for 4 to 5 true leaves. So true leaves are in the shape of the plant's, there's no other way of saying it, they're in the shape of the plant's true leaves versus the seed leaves, which look different. So the plant will start off with 2 seed leaves, and then start to produce its own leaves. When you get 4 to 5 true leaves, then they're good to go outside. And they're also good to go before the last frost. So those can go out nice. To harvest these guys, you just want to cut them when the heads are nice and firm at the base, 4 to 10 inches before the weather gets too warm. And then, you know, some people think, oh, you know, my cabbage looks really good, I'm going to leave it, but it will start to lose its sweetness if you let it go into the warmth. So even if it's not the size you want, go ahead and harvest it while it's cool. So you can get 2 windows, right? You can get a late spring window for cabbage, and then you can harvest in the fall if you get it going again at the end. Cauliflower is very, I don't know, don't be afraid to try and grow some cauliflower, but it's very, very sensitive to temperature. A lot of gardeners don't have success with cauliflower in the first go. If it's too hot, you won't have cauliflower. If it's too cold, you won't have cauliflower. It really likes to be around 15 degrees Celsius. It's also prone to some pests. You do have to start those seeds 7 to 4 weeks before you pop them outside. And they're ready to harvest 70 to 90 days. So they actually have a short seed to harvest length there. And you can pop them out right around the average frost date. So they could, in theory, go out the end of April. Again, I'm always scared to do that, but you can, in theory, put them out the end of April. Before you put any plant outside, you need to make sure they go through a period of hardening off. And hardening off is just to facilitate the transition to them being babied indoors with coddled light and coddled water, to being able to handle some wind and some cold and some direct sunlight. So every day you would take them out. You might start them off 2 hours a day, bringing them out. You know, it starts to become part of your routine. In the morning, you're walking all your plants outside. In the late afternoon, you're bringing them back in. And then if you have your eye on the weather and it looks like it's going to be an okay night, you might even overnight them outside. But you don't want to go right from indoors to in the soil, or your plant will be shocked and all of your hard work will go to waste. And then there's just a note there, if you want your cauliflower to be white, which most people do, you just want to make sure that you cover the head of the cauliflower with leaves so you don't get some photosynthesis there. Winter squash, you could start winter squash in pots right now if you wanted. Even though it really likes warm, you can keep it inside until the soil's nice and warm. Takes a long time to mature, and pests do really like them. Squash seeds are really delicious. Squirrels sometimes just dig them up because they're spazzes, and I don't even think they eat them. They just sort of spaz and all your squash is ripped up. So it is nice to put them in as young plants. They don't transplant well. Having said that, I've never had a problem with moving a seedling into the ground and them not making it for that reason. But if you have someone working in your garden who's not used to weeding, and they're weeding around your squash and they accidentally disturb your roots, that'll really mess up your squash. Okay, so 2 to 3 weeks after the last frost in spring, when the temperature is nice, 18 to 20, here you can see some nice squash plants. They've got some nice straw mulch around them as well. It's nice to mulch them to keep the weeds away. And some people do mounds. If you raise the soil up a little bit, that soil is going to be warmer sooner. So people make squash mounds and then put their squash transplants in there. Broccoli, plan to harvest this before the weather gets too hot. A common problem with beginner growing for broccoli is that it goes to flower. So you do want to harvest broccoli heads before you see any of those yellow flowers. But they're easy enough to start from seed and pop into the garden. There you go. So this is like, I've never had a broccoli grow quite this nice. They're usually in more spread out florets, and you're just sort of breaking off small harvests at a time. As soon as it looks like grocery store broccoli head, just pop it off and it will start making more. Eggplants, you can start those seeds indoors. I've already started my eggplants. They take a long time to germinate, those eggplant seeds, and 100 to 150 days for them to mature to a state you can eat them. And it's nice to cover them too. Insects really enjoy them. So what you can do is use a tomato stake, you know, those circular ones. There's 3 or 4 rows of metal circles and the straight grates. You can put those over your eggplants and then cover that with row cover, and that'll keep your eggplant tucked in and free of pests. That is a beautiful eggplant. Yeah, a key thing about transplanting eggplants are some plants, it's really lovely, you can bury them and help them create more roots. For example, tomatoes, you can bury them pretty deep. But the eggplant, you just want to make sure when you put your seedling in the ground that you've got it at the same level as whatever the soil level is in its current pot. Nasturtiums, it's sort of strange to talk about seed starting flowers at the same time, but you know, your veggies are really going to need some allies from some flowers for attracting pollinators and also deterring from pests. So these guys are doing so many good things, trapping aphids, deterring the cucumber beetle and white flowers. It's also going to attract some predator insects that are going to eat insects that are trying to eat your veg. So they're a really wonderful companion to the brassicas, which is your cabbages, your kales, and your cucumbers, your melons, radishes, and tomatoes. So nasturtiums are good to go. You could start seeding nasturtiums now. There must be a shortage on nasturtium seeds because I didn't get them in my order. Actually, there's a shortage on a lot of seeds right now. Basil, you can start indoors now. It really loves the warmer weather, so you'll be babysitting it indoors for a while still and before it can go out. And basil, of course, is a really wonderful companion to tomato. So sometimes I make sure they're together. And then tomato, of course, there just isn't enough time in our growing season to plant them by seed. So you have to start tomatoes indoors or buy seedlings. They transplant super well. You can bury half of the stem and end up with some nice deep roots. So here we go. In order to start your seeds, you could either use a soilless seed starting mix. You could also use those Jiffy pucks, which expand when you add water. You'll need some trays, a nice warm spot, a south-facing window if you have it. If you don't have a south-facing window, you might want to think about a clamp lamp or some sort of grow light. And you're going to need a spray bottle with water. It really does make a difference. You do want that spray bottle as opposed to a watering can for seed starting. If you're going to make your own seed starting mix, this is a nice recipe here, 8 parts, no one has cocoa, but peat moss, you can do 8 parts peat moss, 1 part vermiculite. Vermiculite is a substance that helps absorb water, so it will prevent your soil from drying out. Perlite adds aeration to your soil. It's like a little styrofoam consistency. Your roots really need soft, fluffy, airy soil in order to grow. So we're really wanting to focus on early root growth for these plants. And then, honestly, I've never bought lime and added it to my peat, and I haven't had problems. But in theory, peat moss is a little bit acidic, so to neutralize that, you can put a bit of lime in there. Once you get your seedlings established, there's lots you need to do to make sure you care for them. And one is, in the seed starting soil, there often isn't necessarily nutrients because the seeds themselves contain everything they need to grow into 2 seed leaves. So they don't need any nutrients at all to germinate. You could germinate them, you know, people who sprout just pop all the seeds into a jar, right? And just make sure they keep rinsing them with water. So they don't need nutrients to sprout, but soon thereafter they will. So you might find that they're not ready to go outside and they need to be fed. So options for that are you can either give them fertilizer, and if you do give them fertilizer, you want to dilute whatever the instructions are by twofold. So do whatever it says and then match that volume with water, because they are quite young. So they're not heavy feeders, but they're going to start to need to feed in order to make their true leaves. So problems that might happen, you might get poor germination. Usually you'll have a heads up about this because the package will say, you know, 98% germination rate or 50% germination rate. It will say right on the package. So if you're working with a plant that is 98% germination rate, sometimes I only put one seed per peat pellet because I'm pretty sure it's going to come up. But if you start to do seed saving, sometimes it gets less and less predictable. Another thing that can happen is something called dampening off. And there's really not much you can do to prevent this. There's some fungus that sometimes takes hold. And I mean, you're creating nice humid conditions, so it makes sense for fungus to occasionally show up. And you'll know you have it because you'll have this nice plant that was growing straight up, and then literally it looks as though it's been cut right at the soil level. And it will look cut. You can also get some mold and some algae growth. You can get pale, stretched out seedlings with weak stems like the ones in the picture here. That's called a leggy plant. So if your plant is leggy, it just means that there wasn't enough light. So it's going to bolt up pretty quick and try really hard to find the light that it needs. But it's not ideal to transplant a plant that looks like this. You're not setting it up for success. So I do recommend, make sure you have the right lighting for your seedlings, or they'll just end up sort of gangly like that. So one of the main mistakes is to sow seeds too early. So don't worry if you haven't sown a single seed yet. You can still start them all now, and they're probably going to be stronger. Most gardeners are just a bit impatient, and the ground isn't workable yet, and we just want to start to get our hands in the soil. So we just starting seeds, and sometimes they just look like they were supposed to go in the earth a lot longer than when we're ready for them. Okay, so tomato plants 4 to 5 weeks old grow better and yield better as well. More tomatoes if you can just hold off and don't start them too soon. I'm gonna share my other camera with you so you can see what I'll show you this first. So this here is a nice tomato that was started a month ago, exactly a month ago, on March 20th. So that's 4 weeks old. Tomatoes are so small growing that that's all we have. So I've already started feeding this tomato fertilizer. I could, transplant them into bigger pots and feed them with nutrients that are in another soil source, but I find it's easier to keep them in the small pot and just keep feeding them in their small pots with a liquid fertilizer. Plus, I don't really have a lot of space to move them all into bigger pots before they go outside. So here is another camera. Do you now see a metal bowl? Yeah, Shelley's saying yes. Okay, good. So these are those peat pellets I was telling you about. You just want to fire in a bit of water. I usually put quite a bit in. I'm going to put a bit more. And let them absorb that. And while they're absorbing that, I'll just show you the seed starting. So this is a seed starting mix. It's different than potting soil. And you definitely don't want to just go outside and find some soil in your garden and fill your your cups, you want to use a proper seed starting soil. So here you can see, just like I was telling you, it's super fluffy, right? This is really wonderful for roots to be able to just burrow through and drink up. So I'm going to put some water in there. So you want to pre-soak your soil. I'm going to put gloves on because if I don't, my computer's going to end up wet. So we're going to make sure that's nice and wet. So we're not adding dry soil to our pots and then watering it. It's not an effective way to make sure your soil has reached saturation. So this is looking good. It's supposed to look like a nice brownie mix, nice and chunky. I could even put a bit more water in, actually. Oh, that might have been too much. No, it's taking it. So you want enough water so all of the water gets absorbed into the soil and there's no puddles in the bowl. So that actually took all that water up. So that's what this particular soil is designed to do, to really hold water. Because if your seed dries out, it's more likely to die. They don't, as soon as your seed dries and it's already popped out a root, that root's gonna die. So they're a bit high maintenance in the beginning, but once you get them germinated, it's okay, you can rest. So this is a peat pot. You can use peat pots, or these look very similar, but this is a cardboard pot and this is a peat pot. Cardboard pots are cheaper, so that's an advantage, but they really hold the moisture a lot more than the peat pot. So I do find that I get more mold with my cardboard compared to my peat pots. Thankfully, it's not the kind of mold that your plants are going to be devastated by, but you'll still want to get rid of it, right? It'll start to make this white fur. Not always, but sometimes. It just holds a lot more moisture. So I'm going to use a peat pot here. And I'm going to fill this one up. I want to leave some room so that there's a little bit of a rim around the soil level so that when I do water, I'm going to take a bit more out, it doesn't spill over the side. So this is actually pretty wet, but I know that this peat pot is going to absorb some of that moisture, so I'm not too worried. Okay, so I've got this one loaded up and ready to go. And I think for today I was going to do, I've already started so many seeds, but I've got this cool kind of lettuce called Dragoon Organic Lettuce. This is a really wonderful seed company. They're from Hamilton, William Dam Seeds Limited. They do have a website that you can order off of, but again, both Stokes, which is another good company that is local and I do order from them, Stokes and William Dam are in a situation where they have shortages of seeds. Lots of new gardeners out there, which is wonderful. And on the seed package, it tells you not only the variety, but it will also tell me things like, this is a 98% germination rate. So that's really happy. And it also tells you how early to start it. So it says sow indoors 4 to 6 weeks before planting outside. So I happen to have cold frames, so I could have started these even in March and popped them into my cold frames. But if you're transplanting without cold frames, I would put them out after, again, I'd put them out after May long weekend. And what other information is it on here? There's lots of good information on the seed pack. So let's pop this open. Just gonna flip my. So the general rule for seed planting, I usually try and keep the thing intact, but is that, oh, see, this is a blessing and a curse. Sometimes you get seeds that are coated, Like, this is not what a lettuce seed looks like, but lettuce seeds are usually so tiny that they're trying to make them more workable for you. So if your seeds look pink or purple or something strange, they've got a coating on them that's usually got a bit of fungicide in there. So it's fine if you're wearing gloves or if you're an adult that's going to wash your hands, but just be mindful if you're working with kids that you don't want them handling this kind of seed that has a coating on it. So I'm going to take my pot, and somewhere I had I'll just use my finger. So I'm going to poke a hole. Lettuce, I know that this seed is a lot smaller, so it really doesn't need to be buried deep at all. I'm just going to actually just pop it in and bury it oh so lightly. So that's enough for that one there. You want to plant your seeds no more than twice the width of the seed itself. But in this case, that rule doesn't apply because they've made the seed look artificially bigger with that coating. So lettuce seeds, sometimes I just sprinkle them right on the surface of the soil and I don't even cover them up because they're so tiny. But in general, all seeds, same thing. If they're uncoated, just bury them twice the length of their width. Oh, that didn't make sense. Twice their width. And then, very, very important, aside from here, we'll do watering first. So here I'm just going to take a spray bottle. If I use a spray bottle, I'm going to be putting a nice even coat of water on the surface. And if I were to use a watering can or some other more heavy watering source, what happens is it will flood it and then my seed will flood up to the surface. You know, it may have just got established, started to poke a root out, and then I flooded it up, or I just keep changing its location by flooding it up. By using the spray bottle, you're making sure you're getting the surface wet, which is where the seed is. So you never want that seed to dry out. So you're going to have to spray it even 2 or 3 times a day in the beginning. And then not only do you want to keep the surface wet that way, but you're generally starting these indoors with your furnace still running. So there's a tendency for the air in your home to be quite dry. So you do want to cover them until they germinate. So I'm going to put this in a nice sunny window until it germinates. And as soon as this plant germinates, I no longer need this, right? This is just to keep the conditions humid enough for seeds to germinate. And then I want to pop it off right away because after germination happens, it's more important to me that I have proper airflow, right? With proper airflow, I'm going to discourage all my fungus and my molds from coming. So you could put that greenhouse right on your windowsill if you have a south-facing window that you feel is quite sunny. I mean, often we're starting seeds indoors before the sun. There's just not enough hours in the day to get them going. So you can do something like, I don't know if you can see this. This is just a clamp lamp that I clamp onto the shelf, and then it's got a grow full spectrum light bulb inside there. Because we're just starting seeds, you don't even really need a full spectrum bulb. I just happened to have one. It was cheap. But you just need a light bulb that has blue light. So often the box for the bulbs will have different wavelengths on them. You just want to look for a cheap bulb that has blue, right? The cooler wavelengths. The cooler wavelengths are good for vegetative growth. So that's all your plants need at this stage, a nice blue bulb. Another thing is we sort of want to pretend or trick these seeds into thinking they've been popped into a nice warm soil. And often by our windows, it's not very warm. So you can also get, these are heating mats. They just plug in and they're roughly the same size as your small greenhouses that you're using. Oh, that was upside down for you. Yeah, so this one's just called heat mat, 10-inch by 20. I haven't been able to find a cheap heat mat. I'm sure people are getting rid of them. You might be able to find them on Kijiji, but This one here I got from TSC. I wanted to make sure I had one for this demo, and it was like $30 or something ridiculous. But it really does make a difference. It's the difference between your plants, your seeds germinating and not germinating. They really need this warmth. The tomato seeds, they did really well. As you can see, my germination rate was pretty good. Here's my tomato flat here. So now you can see these pellets actually absorbed all of the water I put in. And these are just peat. And to use these guys, I love them. They're a lot less messy and great for kids. You're just going to open up the top of the netting, rough them up a little bit. And then where did that other, I think I lost my lettuce seed. You know what I do have? I wanted to do one of these. I've got this, I have like masses of seeds that I've saved from various plants in the fall. I think, ooh, I'm gonna grow you. These are just a whole bunch of calendula seeds. So once you get into seed saving, I mean, you're free. You're just laughing, right? You have so many seeds, more than you'll ever know what to do with. And I'm gonna start a calendula. Calendula is a really nice healing flower plant. It's good for wound healing. I make salves out of calendula. And then a really important thing that I can't emphasize enough is to make sure after you've planted something that you label it. Where's my, I can't find my marker right now, but you get what I mean. Where is my marker? Well, oh, here's a pen. I'll use a pen. So I'm going to say, I'm going to write calendula. And then I also on the other side will write the date. So you know that if you have a bunch of, if you're stagger planting, you know which ones are going to go out early. And you also know when to give up on the germination of a particular plant. If, 4 weeks have gone by and nothing's come up, then, is that the one I just planted? Oh no, this one. There we go, calendula. And then another mistake I've made is, even if, I'm going to switch my camera back here. There we go. So even if it's called a particular variety, like maybe it will say it's called big red or small yellow, make sure you actually put the name of the vegetable on there. I've planted rows of something I got donated, and they were all called slicers, but half the flat was slicer zucchinis and half them were slicer cucumbers. So do include the name of the veg, even if you think it's going to be obvious, big red, just make sure you put the name of the veg in there as well. The other, I just wanted to also show you, I got this one from Rice Road greenhouses because they were open. So this is a nice fertilizer to feed your seedlings. And again, you're going to dilute it by 50%. So do what it says and then double it up with water. And I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover today, which is perfect because we have a little bit of time for questions.
So there was a question in the chat. Somebody asked if you can use egg cartons to start seeds in.
Absolutely. You can use egg cartons for sure, or the peat pots, and both of them you don't have to pull the plant out. You can just plant the egg carton right in the ground and plant the peat pot right in the ground. But for sure, whenever I use egg cartons, sometimes I do get a bit of mold, is the only thing. But it's not the mold that's going to hurt the plant, but you get mold sometimes.
And one other question was, what is a cold frame?
Yeah, good question. So last year I put a structure over top of my raised beds, which have a plastic layer and a wooden frame. And so it's essentially making a little bit of a greenhouse over top of my raised beds. So that means that there's no pressure for me in the fall to pull all my harvest out because I'm extending my growing season. So you essentially have a living refrigerator all the way into, well, we actually ended up harvesting from it year round because the kale stayed. Things will stop growing because obviously the light period isn't long enough, but they'll stay alive. They'll stay alive in there. So I've already got cilantro. I've been harvesting cilantro for the last 3 or 4 weeks because I could seed those, already 6, even 8 weeks ago, we seeded our cilantro. So a cold frame makes all the difference if you want to do some direct sowing outdoors earlier or later. I hope that did that answer your question okay about cold frames?
And the last question was just, can you use seed packets from last year or even the year before?
Awesome. So sometimes seed packets will say these are good for 3 years, these are good for 2 years. Honestly, there's only one way to find out. If they are older seed packets, I generally, if I'm potting, say I was having an old pack of squash seeds, I would make sure I pop 3 into the same pot because germination rate might be a little bit lower. But if seeds are too old, they'll tell you. They won't do anything for you, but they're worth a try, right?
Can I ask, are you really only supposed to put 1 seed per pot, no matter the size of the seed? Because I've planted like an herb garden before and started it in the little greenhouse thing inside. And it's so, I don't know, it's hard to wrap your head around, especially if there's those teeny tiny little black ones and only putting 1.
Yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. Thanks for that question, because now I know I wasn't super clear. You really want to put more than 1 in a pot. So let's say I put 4 in this pot and all 4 germinated. They're close enough together that I'd be worried about damaging the roots. So I can't pull it out and separate into 4 plants. What I'd have to do is snip 3 out of the 4 off. Like I've already had to do this. Each tomato plant here, we put 4 seeds in each pot. All 4 of them came up for some of them, and then I had to select which one looked the strongest and cut the other 3 off at the level of the soil. If you're talking about growing herbs though, maybe you're not so worried about just having a single plant grow into the shape of a tomato. So if you put small herb seeds and you've got 5 cilantros coming up in 1 pot, you can just pop those all into the ground, right? Because you're just going to keep harvesting and harvesting. Same with for your lettuce. They can handle, especially if you're going to do the cut and come again, where you just let your lettuce grow a little bit to the size of a leaf, cut it, let it grow again, cut it. They can handle more density.
Okay, that's good, because I didn't know that you actually cut off the other ones. You don't want them all growing in there.
Yeah, it's
Too much.
Yeah, I know. It's
Okay.
yeah, it just, you get law of diminishing returns, right?
Yeah.
You'll get much bigger harvests if you select 1 out of that pot. But again, like if it says 99% germination rate, sometimes I just bank on it being super successful and I just put 1 in, and then I'm happy that I don't have to kill any.
Yeah, that's.
Thank you.
I
Yeah,
had
no
a
problem.
question that I was hoping to have answered coming into the program tonight, and you pretty much answered it for me. So I'm a newbie, and my mom's sort of guiding me. I put all my little seedlings in my south-facing window, and to my delight, soon enough, everything was sprouting, and I'm thinking, "Yay, I'm on my way." And then a couple of weeks into it, my lettuce ones just seemed to wilt and die. And I think that what I've done is overwatered them, because I was watering from a watering can, like trying to do it very gingerly and just sprinkle a couple of drops. But as I heard you describe, it's better to have just a mist from a water bottle or spray bottle So
Yeah.
now that I've got
Mhm.
the pots with, you know, my vanished hopes of lettuce, can I just restart? Can I just put a few more seeds in and try again and not water them as much?
Most people, like if I'm going to tell you the textbook answer, it is to scrap that soil and start with sterile soil again, because you've had a plant come to life and then go into the decay stages, you're more likely to have your molds and your fungus in there. So I would just start fresh. It's probably not a very big pot. But with your watering, you do want to use the spray bottle only until it germinates. And then it is okay to use a watering can, because then you're starting to tend to the roots. Okay, so after I've been using my mist and it's germinated, I'm going to switch to my watering can as soon as I pop that lid off my greenhouse. And because now I want to encourage roots to grow right to the bottom of this one. Okay, but
Gotcha.
yeah, it's tough to say what happened with your lettuce, but you think it was overwatering?
I think so, because what it looks like it happened, or what looks like happened to me, is that you described popping out. So it seems like they were no longer, the roots were no longer in the soil.
Uh-huh. And did you
Like
use seed starting soil or potting soil?
I used
You know?
Miracle Grow potting soil mix. My mom said it would be okay.
Yeah. No. Yeah, some of them, some of the potting mixes are okay for seeds, and that's one of them. So
Okay.
yeah. Oh, that's kind of a bummer when that happens, but it happens. I've had to chuck a couple of trays as well. I had some mold. I tried using. It's always an experiment. These are like egg cartons, but I thought they were great because they were so cheap. But they disintegrate as soon as they hold water, and you have to transplant them so quickly anyways, because the whole vessel just dissolves. So I'm still learning too.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Any more questions for Jennifer?
I have one other question. Earlier, when you were talking about broccoli, and this is something I've never even remotely tried to grow, but maybe in the future, you mentioned that as soon as you see it looking like a grocery store head of broccoli, you just pop it off, I think you said. And I just wonder what that actually means. Like, how do you pop, because I've never really seen it growing.
Yeah, the grocery store ones lead you to believe that you're going to get this one really big, dense floret. Like, it's not until you start growing your food do you see that grocery store varietals are really selected for looking a particular way. So when you're growing your own broccoli, you may only have one very, let me hold something that's the size of what I'm saying. You know, it might be the size of this here. There you go. And so you're looking at your plant and you see one, maybe you'll have three of them and they're nowhere near each other. As soon as they look like that green but cluster of buds before they open up and flower, then you can already snap. You would just snap off the stem and they're ready to go and eat. But most people just get so excited that it's starting to look like broccoli that they'll miss the actual eating of, and it happens for a lot of food. You might miss the eating window because you're thinking it's going to do something more, or you're just not ready to eat it. But as soon as it looks like food, just cut her and eat it, because otherwise you'll miss your window.
I get it now, because you meant pop it off, because they'll be much smaller than like what we see in the grocery store. Because those I would think you might have to cut off or something, but.
Yeah. Don't wait for your cabbages to look like the grocery store. Don't wait for your broccoli. Yeah, it's a whole new world of growing once you start your own garden. Cauliflower, same thing. I don't know how they do it.
Thank you.
So I guess no more questions from anybody that's here. Well, thanks, Jennifer. That's been great. I think everybody learned a lot. Just for anybody attending, we did record the session tonight, so it'll be up on our YouTube channel on the library website, and probably within about 4 or 5 days. So you can refer to it there, anything Jennifer was talking about. So thanks again, Jennifer.
Oh yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks so much for having me, Annie. Thanks for all your questions and coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Okay, night.
Thank you. Night.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.